Hello and welcome to the LLG vlog, your fortnightly roundup of local government law and practice. You're with me, Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor, and as usual, Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance. Great to see you as ever, Helen. How are
Yeah,
you?
lovely to see you, Dave. I'm really cold this morning. The weather
Oh,
has changed. The weather has changed.
well, it's 1 degrees here in County Durham,
Ooh,
but we're managing. Quite cold. Anyway, back to the big news this week.
yeah.
This is the unexpected announcement from government, at last, of its response to the standards consultation that concluded last February. The announcement, however, is quite clear about the government's ambitions. It says, our response to this consultation sets out our ambition to introduce a clearer and consistently applied conduct system for local authorities in England. And the proposed reforms will help local elected members, they say, to hold themselves and their colleagues to account in meeting the high standards and conduct their roles demand and the public have a right to expect.
Yeah. And in the forward by the local government minister, Alison McGovern, I have to remember that now. She states, I'll quote her actually, that the government is committed to greater devolution, determined to fix the foundations of local government and build a better future for local politics. She makes the point that greater devolution relies on local authorities in which
Mm.
elected members embody the highest standards of conduct, and the public rightly demand its representatives act in their best interests, Dennis. And that those who do not meet the high standards of public office expected should be held to account and appropriately sanctioned. Can't argue with that.
Yep, we can't at all. So first today we'll look at the key headline proposals and what government intends to do in future legislation. And out of interest, we've included response data to demonstrate the level of support in the consultation for each of the proposals that are being taken forward. So first today, we'll look here at the key headline proposals and what government intends to do in future legislation. Out of interest, we've included response data to demonstrate the level of support in the consultation for each of the proposals being taken forward. Then we'll look at how these proposals have been received by others and what the commentators have been saying. So, first, let's look at the government proposals, the key headlines. Now, the first one clearly is that government will legislate to introduce a mandatory code of conduct, which will include a behavioural code for all local authority types and tiers. Now, interesting in the consultation of those who responded on this, over 93.9% said yes, the government should prescribe a mandatory minimum code of conduct for local authorities. However, 61% of those who responded said yes, there should be scope for local authorities to add a mandatory minimum code of conduct to reflect specific local challenges. Now, nearly 30% disagreed and said that it should be a uniform code. And of over 2,000 responses, 91% agreed that the government should set out a code of conduct requirement for members to cooperate with investigations into code breaches.
Mm. I think it will be interesting whether they give any latitude to add to the code or not for that
Yeah.
localized. I don't know where I sit on that, Dennis, because conduct is conduct. I don't know whether there needs to be that slightly different variation in relation to it, because of course we have seen other local authorities put interesting statements, haven't we,
Yes.
into their codes around
Yes, there was the
asking about
Durham
the type.
example the other week.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, let's see. But of course, LLG and our new professional body, and we're making an announcement this week on that, uh, will be looking to input heavily into that code and assist the government where we can, of course. Now, let's look at another proposal. There's going to be a requirement that all principal authorities convene formal standards committees. I know many do, but this will also include provisions on the constitution of standard committees to ensure the three things of objectivity, accountability, and transparency. Now, on this, the consultation outcome was that 90, just over 90% said yes, all principal authorities should be required to form a standards committee. I think also that let's move on, look at another proposal, which was that legislation will introduce the requirement that all principal authorities offer individual supports. Now, that's going to be interesting. during any investigation
Mm.
into code of conduct allegations to both the complainant and the counsellor subject to the allegation. And I'm not entirely sure what that will look like. And then there's this other proposal that legislation will provide for the introduction at the authority level of a right to full review for both the complainant and the subject elected member to have the case reassessed. But that will be restricted to grounds set out in legislation. And again, who does that review is another question, I think.
Yes, interesting those, aren't they?
Mm.
Right. Well, we'll move on to another proposal now. There will be powers in new legislation for authorities to suspend elected members for a maximum of 6 months for serious code of conduct breaches, with the option to withhold allowances during suspension for the most serious breaches, and introduce premises and facilities bans either in addition or as standalone sanctions. Now, there were a range of responses in the consultation on this. Of those who responded, over 86% said yes, local authorities should be given the power to suspend elected members for serious code of conduct breaches. 51% said they agreed that if the government reintroduced the power of suspension, there should be a maximum length of that suspension.
Yeah. And out of, I think it was 2032 responses, in relation to allowances, 86.5% said yes, local authorities should have the power to withhold allowances from suspended councillors in cases where they deem it appropriate. It'd be interesting to suspend a councillor and not suspend their allowance, though.
Yeah.
Almost ought to be default. But I do recall that there were some instances where people felt that might not be the right way to go.
Yes.
But
yes.
And I believe that just over 88% said it should be put beyond doubt that local authorities have the power to ban suspended councillors from council premises and to withdraw the use of council facilities in cases where they deem it appropriate. Now, I know there is a bit of a split view, hasn't there been historically, on whether or not you can do that now.
Yes.
But I think let's just get that into some sort of 100% permanency and be clearer for everyone.
Yeah, as you say, that this proposal will put all of that beyond all doubt.
Yeah.
Now, turning to another proposal, and this concerns the most serious of allegations. So, in response to the most serious allegations involving police investigation, getting my tongue twisted there, or where sentencing is pending, government will bring in powers to suspend elected members on an interim basis for an initial period of 3 months, which, if extended, will require regular review. Now, on this, the consultation said, of those who responded on this particular point, 74% said yes, the power to suspend councils on an interim basis pending the outcome of an investigation would be an appropriate measure. 72% said yes, an interim suspension should initially be for up to 3 months and then subject to review. All seems sensible stuff in my view, Ellen.
Well, yes, because otherwise we're not going to solve any problems, are we?
No.
Without sanctions.
This is the teeth of the proposals, really, isn't it, for those serious matters that come before monitoring officers and so forth.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So let's move from suspension to disqualification. There will be a new disqualification criterion for any elected member subject to the maximum. So this is going to be subject to the maximum period of suspension more than once within 5 years. So that's going to trigger a disqualification.
Yeah.
Now, there wasn't as much support for this. I think people got a bit nervous about, the elected mandates, etc. But the 15, just under 60% said yes, councillors in the response should be disqualified if subject to suspension more than one, if there were 2 suspensions in 5 years. I mean, given that the criteria for suspension, I suspect, is going to be quite high, that's probably going some, isn't it, to get yourself suspended twice?
Yes. It really is those councillors behaving very, very badly who would fall into that category.
Yeah.
And another proposal that's in the paper, the response, there will be legislation for the creation of a new national appeals function. And there's much less on this, what will happen here. And this new body will consider appeals from elected members to decisions to suspend them and withhold their allowances. Complainants may appeal if they consider their complaint was mishandled. Now, any appeal submitted will only be permitted after the complainant or elected member has already invoked their right for review of the local standards committee decision has been invoked, and that process is completed. So there's a sort of triage being
Mm.
introduced there, that you've got to go through local procedures first before going to appeal actually kicks in. Now, on this, on the consultation outcomes here, of those who responded, nearly 70% said yes, there is a need for an external national body to hear appeals in order to maintain the impartiality of the system. And I think that's probably right.
Well, I think under the Human Rights Act, that's got to be the case, given what the sanctions are, probably. Well, no, definitely, actually, and I've talked about that before. It's interesting here, though, there seems to be a suggestion, because the appeal seems to be based on whether or not the complaint was mishandled, rather than the actual finding. So I'm wondering whether there's going to be almost like a permission stage to that appeal.
Yes, yes. It sort of has that effect, doesn't it, what they're putting in here?
It sounds like it, but obviously
Yeah.
the devil will be in the detail.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Need to see a
and
lot
that,
more on this.
oh, 100%, we're going to need to, but that's the main headlines. So what do we know about next steps and timings? Well, on this, McGovern said that in recognition of how important these reforms are to building a better future for local politics, we intend to bring forward the necessary legislation. And this is the tagline: as soon as parliamentary time allows.
How often do we
I
hear that phrase?
A lot, and it's non-committal. I think I think the feeling within the sector is like an 18-month sort of lead-in time.
Hmm.
And it is important to get this right, but obviously we need to
Hmm.
get moving.
Oh, indeed, indeed. So let's look at what commentators and other key people have been saying. So let's turn first to the local government minister, Steve Reid. He said, I know firsthand, because I think he was involved at Tower, was it? No, not Tower, Lambeth
One of the
Council he
London
was
boroughs.
involved in. Yeah,
Mm.
one of the London boroughs. He said, I know firsthand the dedication and talent within our local authorities up and down the country. Going on, he said, he was committed to rooting out those who bring the system into disrepute, and that when a small minority behave badly, it's a disservice to hard-working councillors and, of course, to taxpayers. Turning now to the LGA, responding to the proposal for reforms for strengthening the current council standards regime, Councillor Martin Boughton, chair of the LGA Safer and Stronger Communities Committee, said, the vast majority of councillors act with the best of intentions and uphold high standards. Yet, in those cases where standards have fallen, it is clear that the current system does not meet the requirements of modern local government.
Mm. Well, he went on that we support measures that foster an environment in which respectful debate and freedom of speech is encouraged, providing clear national standards through a mandatory code, and I think robust but proportionate sanctions for misconduct. But the point was also made that equally reforms must protect the rights of councillors and complainants, whilst ensuring local representation is not inappropriately disrupted. And that's the key bit here,
Yeah,
right?
it is. It is. We need to hear more about what those arrangements are to maintain that local
Mm-hmm.
representation. Again, I haven't seen anything on that particular point.
No.
But Councillor Boughton concluded by saying early resolution and consistent guidance will be crucial in building public confidence in a stronger, fairer local standards system. He
Mm.
said, we urge the government to work closely with with councils to implement these reforms in a way that best serves councils and their communities, and will respond to the government's legislative proposals in full when they're released. Well, let's look forward to getting those further proposals in detail as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at the time when I think it went out either was very late or very early in the morning. I think I got a ping around 6:30
Yes.
when it was published. And we LLG went out officially to say that obviously we welcomed the government's response, which we consider to be largely positive, to achieve the aims and ambitions that we have and others long been campaigning for. I think we felt as an organisation that the response does raise some questions, which we've kind of touched on here, and that we will absolutely, LLG will be coordinating with its members and inviting views in order to inform the legislative process and the next steps. But we are uniquely positioned to assist the ministry. And given the launch of our professional body for monitoring officers, which we'll be releasing news on this week, but launching at the governance conference with Gusto, that organisation is going to be pivotal in shaping the future of standards in local government for the benefits of our communities, Dennis. So it's quite exciting time.
It is a lot to look forward to there. Let's turn now to the views of the Ethics and Integrity Commission, the new commission indeed, now under the chairmanship of Doug Chalmers. He said the EIC welcomes the government's proposals for a stronger and more accountable standards system for local government. The proposed changes, which include a mandatory code of conduct and sanctions for serious misconduct, pick up on the recommendations made by their predecessors.
Yeah, back in 2019, Civility in Public Life. I think it seems a long time ago now. And Doug Chalmers, of course, will be making an appearance at our governance conference. We don't know day one or day two quite yet, but that's a very exciting development, and we're delighted to be able to host it.
And many of our members will be interested to know that.
Absolutely,
he's attending. It gives an opportunity for some networking at a high level there.
It certainly does. And in this regard, Doug Chalmers went on to say that we know the majority of councillors and officers want to maintain the highest standards of conduct in their own authority, and that poor behaviour by a minority can have a disproportionate effect. And that is the thing to remember here. This is most councillors and officers, of course, want to do the best and behave in the right way. He did say that these proposals, and then he said, if enacted, let's hope, I mean, they should help address some of the gaps and weaknesses in standards in this important area of our public life.
Yes, indeed. And he rounded off by saying, whether elected or appointed, all those working on behalf of the taxpayer are expected to live up to the Nolan principles, of course.
Yeah.
And we will be watching, he said, the passage of this legislation with interest. Well, Helen, I think that's a wrap. That's it for this episode. We'll see you next time for more legal insights and updates.